Okay, thank you very much, Clerk. Welcome everybody to a meeting of the Finance and General Purposes Committee on Wednesday the 18th of June. The first item is apologies for absences received. Have we any apologies?
No, just apologies, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Second item is the declaration of interest. To receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests from members in respect of the business to be transacted on the agenda tonight.
Yes, well, it's not a pecuniary interest. Some might think it's a conflict of interest, but I hope you won't. Under item 7, devolution, reorganisation, transfer of assets from district to town parish councils. As a Jubilee Centre trustee, I would like to make some comments. Wearing a Jubilee Centre trustee hat. That's acceptable.
That's acceptable by me. Is it okay by you, Town Clerk?
Yeah.
Right. The next item on the agenda is to receive and approve the minutes. The next item on the agenda is to receive and approve
Making sure it was working.
of the Finance and General Purposes meeting held on the 28th of May, and to consider any matters arising from those minutes not covered elsewhere on the agenda. So does anybody have any comments on those minutes? Councillor Lyles?
Yeah, the item 05-25-8 at the end, it says it was moved by councillor and seconded by councillor. The names are missing.
Look back in the records and my notes, I'll find that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so just to fill those
Yeah.
in.
That's spotted. Thank you.
Please propose them, subject to that change.
Yeah, anybody need a second? Councillor Wiles? Can we have a show? Okay.
2 abstentions, yeah, 2 abstentions. Okay.
Item 4 on the agenda is public participation, and I know that we have at least one speaker, and we have individual presentations should not exceed 5 minutes.
Yeah, Christina Glynn.
Thank you. I don't have a proper speech for you, but I'm speaking straight to the agenda items as follows. Item 5, payment schedules. The end of May payment schedule is a duplicate with the one that was presented at the Finance and General Purpose on the 28th of May and also submitted to STC on the 2nd of June. Now, I'm kind of hoping that that's just a duplicate presentation rather than a duplicate payment run. So I'll leave that with you. And the other point under item number 5 is missing financial reports to the end of May, namely the cash book, the budget variance report and the bank rec for May. Now, as I see it, that's a loss of transparency both to councillors and to the public, and potentially a lowering of internal financial controls, especially as the full council meetings are moving to a reduced frequency and the Finance and General Purpose Committee is expected to take a larger financial control role. That is not going to be possible if reports are not presented to the committee. Further, no record of these reports being dropped or when they will be presented for review is actually with the agenda. So what would the committee's intentions be for handling these issues? So that's the first part of my speech. The second part is item 9, Fishergate, and I'd like to thank the property manager for his comprehensive and very professional report. It was clearly a significant task and I'm very impressed by the report, including the use of relevant reference points and the clear explanations given, leading to a proposal to enter into a joint venture with the Sandwich Heritage Harbour Trust to develop a community space including a maritime museum and a multi-use room for hire on the upper floor. Fishergate is an important historic building in the town that has languished unoccupied for too long, and, subject to approval this evening, I look forward to the day when I can support the proposed joint venture to move towards opening for the public in line with the property manager's proposal. And I've been trained to give specific feedback, so there we have it. That's my very specific feedback. The report was excellent. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody want to comment on the public participation?
Only to say that is a duplicate report, so that there isn't another report, that is a duplicate. Yeah.
And I think it's also worth commenting that the RFO has changed,
Yes.
and I don't believe that the reports have been, you know, purposely
No,
not presented,
No.
and I'm sure they will be presented in due course.
they were. Yeah, and it is literally the interim RFO is still obviously getting to grips with all the systems and everything. Yeah, but they will be presented very soon.
Yeah. And as was stated the other night, there was a glitch. I spotted a glitch in the system, and I know he's been contacting the software providers to get those glitches looked at. Okay, shall we move on to agenda item number 5, the payment schedules. We've got 2 schedules. 5A to receive the Sandwich Town Council schedule for the end of May, which has already been said was a duplicate, but the second one is to receive the Sandwich Town Council payment schedule for mid-June. Does anybody have any comments on either of these, knowing that we've already approved one?
Yes, I do have a couple of questions. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to contact the RFO in advance as per my usual practice for reasons that you know. Remedial works, the sluice wall, whereabouts is, which sluice are we talking about?
We're talking about Monk's Wall Nature Reserve.
Ah, right, okay, that's sluice, right, okay. And the other thing was, transport for mayor making, that's not for this year, is it, or? Because I didn't, unless we had a sort of motorcade with that outriders, I didn't see that happening.
So I'd have to check in with the interim RFO to find out what, but I believe it might have been before the mayor making. I think it was other town mayor making transport for the previous mayor.
It's the previous, and we went to New Romney.
Sorry?
New Romney.
Okay, that's fine,
Yeah,
thank you.
I've questioned already.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. It just seemed a bit odd at this time. If it was, a previous duty that you've been requested to do, that's not a problem at all.
Yeah.
I think those are my only questions.
I suppose as a supplementary that, I assume that the costs for the previous periods are taken out of the current year's expenditure for the mayor's expenses. Because we're in
Yes.
the new year.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we could for the previous year budgets. I didn't get that.
But we're in the new financial
Yes,
year.
we are.
We can't.
I can't go back.
Depends on when the
It
invoices are
was great,
submitted.
yeah, selected, yeah.
Okay, if there are no further comments, is anybody willing to propose acceptance of these? Approve them?
Happy to. I'll second.
Okay, and we have a show. Thank you.
Yeah, everybody's.
Sorry, Councillor Anderson.
So,
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, the third item on the agenda is the priorities, the terms of reference status and action log of the committee, which has been reset following the new civic year. And I hope it's self-explanatory. You will see, and in terms of the way it's set out now, we have something like 5 high priority items, and then some medium priority items and some lower ones. But the focus I think we should be looking to is to try and achieve the target dates of those items. Does anybody like to discuss any of the high priority items? Councillor Black?
I have 2 issues. One's a minor one, item 1 under the notes. there's a typo. It's dynamic reorgs rather than records, but that's me being a pedant. Item 3, I wonder should devolution be separate? We're right, and it is a priority to manage the physical assets of STC, but devolution may be such a major item, I just question whether it should be a separate priority item, because obviously the word devolution has been added to this.
Well, we're going to talk about devolution or
Okay.
reorganisation of the local councils as a separate agenda item. So yes, I'm quite happy going forward to put that on. We need to decide how we're going to address all of these aspects associated with evolution of the local government reorganisation. Mr. Mayor.
So I was just going to say that 3 is just transposing the words from 1 and then just adding in devolution. So I think it's specific to devolution. When we want to recast the words under that number 3, that's fine. But I know, for me, I know what it relates to. It's specifically to devolution.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, because as you say, the terms of reference are wide-ranging when they
Yes.
say to manage all the
Yeah.
physical assets,
Okay.
and there are many aspects to that. Okay, is everybody happy to note the or the revised, and is everybody happy with the deadline dates that have been, or the target dates that have been indicated to try and achieve? Okay.
Those that we noticed.
Okay,
I'll
thank you.
second that.
Can we have a show of votes, please? Thank you very much, everybody. So item 7 on the agenda is devolution, the reorganisation of the local councils, the transfer of assets from district, or the potential transfer of assets from district to parish councils. So we have received a list of assets here, and I would like to put it out to the floor to take comments. Any comments from anyone? Right, so Councillor Super first.
If I could just sort of give a snapshot of what I've been doing and also been doing with the town clerk. So we knew in January that devolution was happening, but in terms of the activities I've been involved in, it's over the past 4 weeks. So firstly, we met, myself and the town clerk, with the town clerks and mayors for Deal and also Dover Town. Walmer are going to be invited as well, on the basis that 35 parish councils going to DDC separately is not necessarily the best way to try and get a response. So we're looking to join up and try and brigade somewhere intersecting DDC to get their views. So that's number 1. Secondly, I'm meeting with Kevin Mills on Friday this week, and that will be at the top of my list of the discussion items raised. Thirdly, within the pack you have a paper from a PowerPoint slide set from Sevenoaks, which includes some very specific information that's very helpful. And fourthly, I've spoken to the Mayor of New Romney, not Joan Rivers, but John Rivers, and they are getting some traction with Folkestone and Hythe District Council, but only to a limited extent. So they are further down the track in terms of providing a proposal in terms of what they might want to seek around asset transfer. I have got some comments specifically when we start talking about our assets, which I'll bring up, but that's just to give a broad brush of what I've been doing and with the town clerk's involvement as well.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask, in the paper or the presentation, it was really good because it showed the different rounds.
Yeah.
And there was a one round at the end of June, by which time there is a need to submit expressions of interest in whether it's assets, and it's not just restricted to assets.
Yeah.
It's services and intellectual property, and we've only got a schedule of the assets to review at the moment. So we could really do with with confirmation that the end of June is a deadline for expression of interest.
No, it's not. So that schedule is Sevenoaks
Right.
District Council actually engaging with their parish councils. And John Rivers, who is also the chair, I believe, of CALC, made it clear that Sevenoaks are way on the positive end of the spectrum.
Right.
And when I talked about Dover, he had nothing to say about them in terms of engagement, because there is no engagement.
Right.
But I think the thing is, what that presentation does is it flags up for me two key issues. District councils will not be easily convinced about discharging any of their assets that are revenue generating.
Yeah.
So that's number one. It says within the slide set, it's about pushing upwards, not downwards. And the second thing is that Sevenoaks are engaging, and they are allowing their parish councils to engage with them, but ultimately all the power rests with the principal authority, which will be the unitary authority in time.
Yeah.
So for us to convince Dover to do anything, I think it's going to be a tough task based on what's happened up to this point, which is nothing.
But nevertheless, we should submit expressions of interest if we're for various aspects, for various assets and so forth. And we should work with all parties. I saw that there was a questionnaire from NEL, which we should complete as well. Okay, Deputy Mayor, have you got? Did you want to say something?
I think Councillor Black was first.
I think what Councillor Black said is accurate. When Councillor went to a presentation at Whitfield, every single parish there was berating Dover District Council for their lack of engagement, and we got absolutely no answers from them. So I do think we have, in this district, perhaps a greater challenge than in some districts. But if they're still not engaging with us, that is extremely disappointing.
Well, they'll have to engage at some stage over the floor. The thing for us is to keep pushing.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Councillor Wiles or Councillor Pennington?
Yeah, I mean, the list of assets is interesting, as the Mayor pointed out. Where they're generating an income now, it's unlikely that either DDC or the legal authority will want to pass them on to us. But I can see from this list there are some assets that we should make a bid for. If you want to go through the list, if that would be helpful.
Well, I don't know if we want to get into that level of detail just at the moment. Okay. Anything else, Councillor Wiles?
No.
Councillor Pennington?
I've had my hand up for a considerable length of time.
We're working around
I'm happy
plot
for Councillor Anderson to speak.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not clear, you're wanting everybody to comment. You're going round the table.
I was going to go around the table, yeah.
Oh.
So.
Okay, so thank you. I share the view that we have to keep pushing on this, and I fear that somehow the reality that the current structure will no longer apply in future hasn't really sunk into hearts and minds, but either at DDC or, for all I know, at KCC. I do think we should seek to make this exercise as far as possible one of devolution to town and parish councils, where we feel we can manage the assets, and I think the difficulty is going to be to sort out the revenue flows, both for the new unitary council and for town and parish councils. I'm not quite sure how this operates in Medway, and if anybody can enlighten me, I'd be grateful.
Well, I'm sure things may become clearer, but we can't enlighten you at the moment, I'm sorry. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you. I've looked at these documents with interest, and as I said at the start of this meeting, I'm wearing two hats, both as a councillor and as a trustee of the Jubilee Centre, which is listed on the list of assets as the Phoenix Youth Club, and I think the playgroup that is referred to is almost certainly the merry-go-round nursery, but I cannot be certain, and that needs to be checked. The second set of papers that I've looked at are the papers from Sevenoaks, which are very interesting, and as has already been pointed out, the timetable on that PowerPoint presentation is relevant to Sevenoaks and not to Dover. So I'm also not clear whether the notes that are on that presentation, which refer to community asset transfer, whether that's specific to Sevenoaks or whether there is some sort of procedure which is already in place which applies to all these asset transfers that are taking place as part of the national devolution process. So that would also, it would be helpful to know whether that is specific because to Sevenoaks or whether it's a more general suggestion, because it includes a paragraph, if an asset is used for social, community and public purposes and the benefits of that service are deemed to outweigh the value of continuing ownership by the council, and in this case that must mean Sevenoaks District Council, on behalf of its residents, the council may consider the transfer of the asset to the parish or town council or a charity or community group known as a community asset transfer. So I don't know whether that is, as I say, a general injunction across the board for all the devolution process or whether it's specific to Sevenoaks. But if it is specific to Sevenoaks, then I think Dover District Council should be pointed in this direction because clearly the Jubilee Centre, which I want to remind you, is registered as an asset of community value with DDC. I was part of the group that initiated that process and we succeeded in getting it registered as an asset of community value. And the same people who got it registered as an asset of community value then developed a new charity, which is why we had to change the name because the Charity Commission insisted on it, from the Phoenix Centre to the Jubilee Centre. And we currently have a 25-year lease, or it was a 25-year lease, it now has 22 years remaining with DDC. Now, it's quite clear, I think, that the Jubilee Centre does offer social, community and public services, and therefore it would fall into this category, both because it is an asset of community value and also because of what it currently does and what is delivered at the Jubilee Centre. It is clear that it falls within this general paragraph that Sevenoaks has developed. And it seems to me, and I'm acting chair of the trustees of the charity that runs the Jubilee Centre, that we need to move at pace about the issue of the ownership of the Jubilee Centre. And this council and the charity trustees need to meet urgently to decide and hopefully agree on objectives, common objectives as to what they want to happen, whether they want Sandwich Town Council to become the landlord of the Jubilee Centre, and to develop a pathway towards that, because reading all these papers, it does seem that expressions of interest have to be made by the end of July, as I understand it, and we will need to have done something by November. I'm still not clear. We really do need to develop a time. We need to agree objectives, and we need to develop a timetable, and hopefully, and I'm aware that in this council there is a lot of sympathy for and feeling in favour of what is happening at the Jubilee Centre, and I would hope that we could work together to come to, as I say, agreed objectives and agreed pathways, and obviously also that has, and we have to work at pace. The trustees of the Jubilee Centre charity have not yet met to discuss this, but I did some time ago alert the trustees to this issue, and one of the trustees has been away for a while, but is returning quite soon, and I hope that as trustees we will be meeting soon, but I do need to be able to give them some sort of concrete idea as to what the options are, what the timetable is, and so on.
Okay.
Could I just
There's a lot there.
respond?
Yeah.
So in terms of my issues I'm taking to Kevin Mills on Friday, number one is devolution and asking him about community asset transfer process. You see that's written down there. Number two is the Jubilee Centre, which falls out of that. So I will be making sure that what you've just said is articulated to him within the context of devolution. What I would suggest is, if we are having an extraordinary meeting of F&GP next week, I can report back how well or not that conversation went, so at least you then have it within a matter of a few days, rather than waiting to the next cycle.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes, so so I could arrange with the trustees that we meet after June the 25th. Yes. Okay.
You know, that sounds like a good proposal, but at the moment we really haven't got any positive information or certainty about this.
No, but it would be useful to have clarified whether, as I say, this set of paragraphs about community asset transfer, whether that's just specific to settlements.
We can only assume for the time being that it will be similar for Dover. It's a working assumption. Okay, thank you. Councillor Paul Carter, have you got any comments on this subject?
No, I gave my views on this 2 months ago, and it seems like Councillor Tuker is actually taking up some of the comments I made. So it looks like what I said is being progressed. Thank you.
All right. Well, unless there are any other comments.
Just one point that I noticed, which is good news, on the 2 Market Street, where they show themselves as the trustee of that property, not the freehold owner that they claim. So that's a good point. That's on there.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Wiles, on your vote.
The report also talks about devolution of services. We're not just talking about assets here, but potentially services as well. So presumably the town clerk can advise on this, but I mean, clearly in terms of Sandwich, one of the biggest issues for us is planning. I'm not suggesting we have our own planning department, but perhaps planning enforcement could be something that is handled locally. Because if planning goes to a new unitary authority of 6 or 7 districts, it's going to be even more remote than it is currently.
So that was discussed at the meeting Councillor Black and I attended at Dover District, and what they explained would happen, where would be the unitary, because obviously the unitary won't be able to deal with hundreds and hundreds of planning applications, so there will be people sat under the unitary, and they called them, it was either area committees or there was another phrase that they are used apparently nationally under unitary authorities, but Councillor Mills was concerned because he said they won't be elected members these will be people appointed that aren't elected members. So that was where Councillor Mark Mills, if you remember, had that concern that it was, sort of going against democracy, because these people on these committees, or there was another phrase he used, it was either area committees, or he said they won't be elected members, they will be, lay people or people that have been appointed. But it was actually raised by the local parish councils at that meeting with Dover District.
Would the officers be devolved as well, or just the committees?
They didn't go into lots of detail, but they said that's how it operates in other unitary places, where there are unitary authorities in place. That's how it operates.
To add what the town clerk has said, it was raised, and it was raised by one of the larger parishes.
It was.
I can't remember, was it Aylsham?
Yes, it was Aylsham.
It was Aylsham.
Yes.
And they said if you look throughout the country, there is no reason to have it in the unitary authority. So other places already have a different planning arranged, at least for discussion. Obviously, enforcement and the regulation may need to be done differently. But it was specifically raised, and I saw some distinct twitches in Dover District Council of this prospect. So I think there are a lot of questions to be answered.
But if everything is up for grabs in the mix, then imagine if Sandwich Town Council had its own planning enforcement officer, like the old park inspector, or it would be so much more effective.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, just very fine. I'll just say, personally, I think we need to make sure that what we bite off we can chew. We also need to recognise this is devolution upwards, not downwards.
Yeah.
Things like planning, I can't see it going anywhere other than upwards, albeit with an infrastructure that sits below it. I think services is things like street cleaning, the sort of practical stuff that you might employ somebody to do that work. That's the level.
There's no harm in making the case, though, is there?
Well, they do need to be considered. The business case implications of kind of carrying out some of these services. Okay, shall we go down the list of assets now? Let's take them in the broad categories, or the headline categories. The cemetery.
Is that Boatman's Hill?
It's the Woodman Cemetery.
That I said, we call it Boatman's Hill, don't we?
Yep.
Is that something that we're interested in?
Is there an income from that? Presumably there is from.
There's also expenditure, obviously, grave digging and
Maintenance,
of the
grass cutting.
Yeah.
That people pay for the graves.
Yes, they do. It's not usually very much money, I would say,
Probably
because
more of a liability than.
Yep.
and inspecting the gravestones, you to do that on an annual basis to make
you
sure.
do. Legal requirements.
Okay,
Leave that one.
leave that one. The Butts Playing Field and Pavilion, which is used by Sandwich Town Cricket Club.
They pay an income.
Yeah.
I think it's also important for the character of the town.
Well, yeah, but the grass cutting requires an awful amount of equipment and everything on there. That's huge, tens and hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of investment.
And what's the
So if
business
you've got
scope?
play areas there, you'll need insurance as well.
Yeah.
Gaze and Salt's Nature Reserve.
And
Now that kind of stands alone, and whether that is a
An asset, yeah.
community asset.
So one thing I do know is that Gaze and Salt's Nature Reserve are now being told they need to start paying rent to Dover District Council, I believe. So I believe one of the trustees told me that recently. So they're expecting to have to pay an amount. So there is an income stream from it. But again, all of these, a lot of these that involve land have a significant on cost in terms of maintenance, insurance, repair, vandalism, staffing, all of that. And we can ask the question, I suspect there will not be a slicing and dicing of money that the district council has, that are then given out to districts to run it. You have to come up with a sustainable model yourself, is my personal view. But we will ask a question.
Sorry, Martin.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have in my head a real structure for going at this list. I fear that if we are going to try and cherry pick all the ones that might generate a nice income, it won't be credible. I think we should really ideally have a set of figures to work on as to how much is coming from each asset and how much it's costing. And I realise that we are unlikely to have that information within a short period of time.
Yeah, well, I think it's useful to kind of list out some of these assets because it's flushing out the fact that there are all of these costs and aspects that would need to be included in the business case, and we just haven't got the information to be able to make positive expressions of interest or really get to a point where we've got kind of the evidence and the information to be able to make a decision on it.
Yeah.
Might add not only the ongoing cost, the continual annual cost, but some of these places are getting quite old, and the cost of refurbishing, upgrading, and so on. I have no idea what the state of the pavilion is, for example, how new it is or whatever. But having seen some of the things we've got on places like the Fishergate, it gets very complicated and could get very expensive.
Yeah, as could the Sandwich Key.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got a flavour for all of these. So having started it, shall we just jump down to the conveniences?
So for me, this is one area that actually I think is a significant risk if it goes up to the unitary council, because if they look at their assets, we're running the toilets in terms of staffing and cleaning, etc. And they were closed beforehand and reopened because the town council is paying for those aspects. I could see those being closed. So for me, this might be an aspect of something, if it came at zero cost, we might want to take on board. However, the Castle Market toilets are in significant need of refurbishment.
Yeah.
If we took those on, we would be straight away looking at a number of £1,000s. However, DDC are already looking for a grant to refurbish them this year, so hopefully that happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, if you can kind of get some feedback on what's happening with those, but I think from what you're saying, nobody is challenging it, and I think that's it's well worth kind of keeping control of them. The non-operational property, the Women's Institute building on Sandwich Market.
Which building is that?
Sorry.
The Women's Institute building.
It's sort of a very dirty, glassy looking building next to where the street cleaners put their trolleys.
Yeah.
It's a long building.
Oh, I know the one.
Near the doctors.
Yeah.
Isn't that almost used
Yes.
for storage?
Events.
Yeah, events material. I know what it is, thank you.
So would that be considered an operational building? No.
Yeah. So I think the Women's Institute, I think there's a strong case to be made for that transferring to the town council. It doesn't generate any income that I'm aware of, but it's heavily used for community events. SCEA use it, other groups use it. But like many of the other assets on this list, they don't have an actual income, but they have an annual expenditure. My expectation would be that that expenditure would transfer with the asset. So their preset would go down and ours would go up. But whether that will happen in practice, I don't know. I mean, the town walk has no income, but I don't know what the annual cost of that is. It must be several thousands, I would imagine, in terms of insurance and maintenance and so on. But there would be a case for saying that should come under Sandwich Town Council because it's a scheduled monument, it's, you know, the jewel in our crown to some extent. Why don't we own it and look after it?
Mm.
The same with the quay. I mean, the quay it doesn't generate much income at the moment, but it could generate an income in partnership with the Heritage Harbour Trust.
Yes, that has huge potential there.
Yeah.
That whole stretch.
And again, there's a big argument in terms of tourism and visitors to say that we should control that.
I would like to add to that. I mean, I think going through this list and sort of guesstimating as to whether they're income producing or not, without the data is not that helpful. But also, I would like to say that there are some assets here which have more than a monetary value. I mean, that we should consider what the risks are if, for example, a unitary authority owns the Gaze and Salts Nature Reserve or the Keep. How much notice they would take of it, how much they would care for it, how much imagination they would bring to bear on it. And I do think that we have to think not just in terms of money, but also in terms of power.
Terms of
Power. That if we own a property, then, you know, the decision as to the direction, the mission of that property, its use and so on, is within our authority. And we, at this level, are the people who use whatever the asset is, or know people who use it. And I think we should, you know, of course income is important. We don't want to run up huge debts, but we also should consider the externalities, the additional benefits other than income.
Yeah, I'm always concerned about the condition of the property and getting proper condition surveys done, because for something like the quay, when that comes to being repaired, it's going to cost, it'll be in the millions if the quayside needs to be reconstructed and the like. So, you know, getting small amounts of income from boats, paying mooring fees will not really have a kind of an impact. And if we do get income, it would need to go into a sinking fund for the proper maintenance of the assets, so that each asset kind of washes its own face and is standalone.
I agree, but of course the way in which one does major works of that kind and gets funds for it is through grant applications. And I'm just, I would feel that the motivation to write good grant applications which are successful would be higher at this level than it would be at a unitary authority level.
That's an interesting comment, Councillor Mike.
I think the principle here is that there's lots of assets on this list that are enjoyed by people beyond Sandwich. And so currently the whole of Dover district pays for it, but it could be people from the rest of the world who are enjoying the asset. So it's not really fair that only residents of Sandwich pay for the asset going forward. So there would have to be some kind of, if we were to take any of these on, there would have to be some kind of financial reckoning that reflected that wider enjoyment, if you like.
Very logical. Mr. Mayor?
Just to counter that, if any property, including the Jubilee Centre, will have a value as a building, or even as, heaven forbid, a building plot, that's the hat that Dover District Council...
A cemetery extension, that's
the
other possibility.
That's a hat that Dover District Council will wear. What they won't do is actually say, here's money for you to take it away from us. What they will do, if they have a conversation, is say, right, we will have a valuation of the property or the land, and we will come up with what it means to you in terms of purchasing it. That's what the relationship will be, and that will be my expectation around all of this.
But it's interesting that the 7X paper does actually indicate, I haven't got it up anymore.
It says about going below,
Yeah.
yes, there is.
Where there's
there
a
is-
community value.
Yeah, I agree.
But if it's a liability, we wouldn't want to take on a liability if there's major works needed in the short or medium term. That just make it uneconomically viable, then it wouldn't happen. But we've still got to get through kind of a process of getting, for each property that we might be interested in, getting the survey condition, getting the operational costs, understanding the financial impact, and getting to a position of having a business case for it, or a business justification for it.
Chairman, I just add on there is that it's virtually a situation with some properties, it will be reverse premium. You actually get paid to take something away if it's actually got that much work that needs to be done. So, that could well be the case. If there is premises and land, there could be a reverse premium. So they would actually pay to someone else to take on the problem.
Well,
that's commonplace.
Yeah, again, but that would come out of the condition survey.
Exactly.
So, that's got to be kind of the
And so we don't know what their expectations, how much they're actually gaining out of the areas. And we mentioned the quay. How far are we going down the quay? Are we going to where the area of the green where they're renting it out, the space out? I don't know. Looking at that, the exact location.
So you have an annual expenditure and you capitalise that, and you give that as a dowry at the outset to look after it for the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think we've talked enough about this for tonight's meeting. I'd like to kind of draw it to a conclusion, and we'll wait to have a feedback maybe next week at the extraordinary meeting, if everybody's in agreement.
Can we, at that meeting, then decide what we're going to do from an action perspective? Because we don't meet again, I don't believe, for...
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
When do we meet again? After tonight? Oh, so is it
July.
papers?
The 16th of July. 16th of July.
Which pushes on too far. Yeah, so we need some action at the next meeting.
Yeah, but we need to understand what the actions are that we've got to do, and what the implications are, and what the cost is, and so forth. Okay, so are we happy then to kind of note this report and agree to follow this up as an agenda item on next week? I'm happy to propose that. Anybody willing to second? Councillor Flagg. I have a vote on that, please. Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda, item 8, is an internal audit for the year end 31st of March, the final audit report to receive. This report prepared by Mulberry Local Authority Services Limited, decision required. Has anybody got any comments on this report? Okay, I'd just like to kind of read a couple of things out of this report, because I actually think the report is a testimony to the good work that our previous RFO did. And it says, it is clear that the council takes governance, policies and procedures seriously, and I'm pleased to report that overall the systems and procedures you have in place are fit for purpose. And whilst my report may contain recommendations to change, these are not indicative of any significant failings, but rather are pointers to improving an already well-ordered system. So I think if this was a school Ofsted report, it would be outstanding. So Councillor Schuker, have you got?
Yeah, so I agree completely. It's an excellent report, and it does give testimony in terms of the application applied by the previous RFO in terms of delivery. So that's great. But I've got a specific comment, and this links to an extent to devolution and assets. but also more importantly to the HR report that's coming to STC on next Monday. So 5.34. So this talks about the minimum level of an authority's general reserve, and it's quite broad in terms of what reserve the council would be expected to have. But what I'm really doing is flagging up a word of caution about reducing that, and then as a consequence falling foul of expectations in terms of audit. So we do have a significant challenge in terms of recruitment, because that costs money, and the only source is the general reserve that we've got to fund that. So we might have to make some difficult choices beyond that in terms of making sure we balance the books over time, because we can't create money. And I'm just flagging up now, so there are dominoes here in play. So when we discuss on Monday the HR report, we need to be mindful of this report.
Yeah, understand. Right, thank you.
On the same paragraph, what is our percentage of reserves at the moment?
We have something like 59,000.
Yeah.
So that's about 1/6 of turnover of the precinct.
It's a couple of months, less than a couple of months. We're turning
Yeah,
over
it's
about
about
35,000 a month.
So a little bit low.
Yeah.
That is a little bit, and that was just my question. What do we do? Because we will eat into it this year. And how do we start to rebuild it?
Well, this is a challenge for us kind of going forward.
Yeah.
But let's get this HR report on the table.
Yeah.
Let's see how things progress in terms of how much of the estimated cost of recruitment it actually turns out, the outturned cost against the estimated cost, and we can take it from there. Okay.
Just make one point. I think it's more than just one person who's contributed to the effort. I think I'd like to say that the clerk is managing the RFO, and so I think that's a point that we can all too easily miss. And it is a team of people that have delivered. It is a first-rate report.
Okay, so I'm happy to propose acceptance. Anybody willing to second?
Yep.
Can you please have a vote? Thank you very much. I think that's unanimous. Okay, so the item 9 on the agenda is the Fishergate update report. Shall the committee to consider a report from the property manager that includes an overview of research undertaken. Property manager, would you like to give us the highlights of the report? It's a very comprehensive and detailed report.
Yes, it's quite in depth. I've obviously undertaken a lot of research. So rewinding back to when I suggested that we looked at holiday lets, but with a hybrid model, so holiday lets, but also having other space that we could let to bring in income. So that was the original idea, was the holiday lets. And then it was, obviously the question then was raised, that's fine saying what the income could be, but let's have a look what profit or what loss you could have going down the holiday let route. So I've spent a long time on the holiday lets. It's a lot more complex actually than I gave it credit for, to be honest. So I've done my research, I've contacted companies, I've looked at it, and I then looked at the finance, how much it would actually cost us to actually run a holiday let, even getting a company involved with it. So that's what I've produced. I've given the figures. You know, I've been realistic. You know, I haven't over-egged it to try to make it work. You know, I've given a clear insight of what holiday lets would actually be, and you know, the truth of the matter is it doesn't make a profit. It would make a profit if you were someone that could do it all yourself and you were there on hand, as it were. Also, doing the holiday lets, including any more weeks in this under that scenario, again, it wouldn't allow me to get, use the space as well. So with the holiday lets, it was a restriction on, it was a lot of time that was going to be involved, it didn't make the money, and in addition to that, any potential funding, it was a no-go, absolute no-go. So on the holiday let side, that I could not be putting that forward as a recommendation for those reasons, and for the reasons that I've outlaid in my, in that part of my report. So happy to take any questions on the holiday let side if anyone has any.
No, I think you're very clear on that, thank you, and I think it reinforced some kind of initial gut feelings and thoughts that have been previously expressed.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Are you
Councillor
taking-
Pennington.
Well, I have three comments. One, excellent quality of the report. I really felt convinced that it had been addressed thoroughly, and second is that I was never comfortable with the holiday let solution anyway. I feel much more comfortable with what is now proposed as a hybrid. Thirdly, when I started reading about the rip out, I thought, oh, I bet we will have fun doing that. And then I saw this proposal to do it as a community group, and I think that's terrific.
Yeah.
As long as it's done quite carefully, but I can imagine all sorts of groups might be interested in
Sparking interest
finding
in
out what's
property.
underneath all that stuff.
As long as it's supervised and everyone has a clear understanding of what they
Yeah.
do, you cannot get a better PR, to be honest, than getting public involved. And as far as getting grants, funding, and just general interest, I think that
Yeah.
be able to bring it in house is good.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor
Yeah,
Morris.
so the holiday let idea, we going back in time, I think we were looking at the landmark trust model.
Yes.
Couple of questions for Julian, because you say funding's not available, but landmark trust properties, the Pugin property at Ramsgate, for example, which it's not a scheduled monument, but it's a listed building, that got Heritage Lottery Fund money. So there are sources of funding, but even if there weren't sources of funding, we as a council are sitting on over 4 million of portfolio shares, which, given this is the most important building in the town, should we not think about committing some of that money to this property? But also on the holiday let, I think your figures they might be realistic, they looked a bit pessimistic to me, but you're only looking at 20% occupancy through the year?
No.
For
It wasn't 20%.
You're looking at 30 lets, you said.
30 lets a year of four days each.
No, I wasn't looking at it. It was higher than that.
Estimated year one.
25 lets, yeah. So 50% of the year, yeah. So yeah.
25
lets. 25 lets, not 25. Not let's say 25 weeks. 25 lets.
25 lets of
Yeah.
4 days each, 4 nights.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
100 days a year.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's about less than a third
Yes.
of the year.
Yeah. If you look over a period of, I was doing it in I started off doing it on the short terms, as in, just 4 days, and then after speaking with a company, they said, no, you can look at doing it over a longer period of time. But even on doing the 7 nights, they were still under 50%.
But if you go above, is it 100 and something, you get business rates instead of council?
That correct. But you have to get that. So you're better off if you do more than you are less. You do less, you get council tax. If you do business rates, you'll be able to get some exemption. But it's getting that risk if it doesn't happen. But I think my figure. I did obviously the comparisons. I spent a while contacting people to see when their properties were let and when they're not, and yeah, I'm happy with the, you know, with the figures. And it's one of those things when you first have a holiday let, I have been involved with one before, and the first sort of year or 2 years is very difficult, but you know, it does pick up. But even if it picked up a lot, it still doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't work. It does work if you say, if you're next door and you can go in and do your bits, you're not relying on staff to be involved. As soon as you've got staff involved, then it doesn't, it doesn't work. I thought it would. I wanted it to. I really wanted to, because I spent a lot of time initially. I wanted it to be a holiday let, plus the additional space. You know, I didn't want it just one. I wanted it to be both. But that, what I've seen doesn't.
Can we move on to the grant funding?
Yes.
That was the first, holiday lets was the first section of report.
Sorry, Chair, just to go back to that, it's not a 4-night stay, you're basing it on a 3-night stay.
Sorry, 3 nights.
3 nights.
Yeah, 3 nights.
So that's 75 days a year.
Yeah.
So it's a quarter of the year.
Yes.
Sorry, 20% of the year.
Yes.
Occupied.
Yes, but you wouldn't do, when you were looking at long weekends, you'd take them on as a week. You wouldn't say, oh, you're going to do it from Tuesday to Friday or Thursday. So you would typically do it over those long weekends.
But a more commercial operation would
Look at
much higher.
Look at definitely 7 nights, which when you do that, it does actually bring a profit. When you look at, I did an example of income looking at losing their system or what they recommended. So then on that one, I just took year 2 as an example. That brought in 17,700 income, expenses 12,374. It brought a profit of 5,326. No other income you could get in the building from anywhere else anyway, and that was based on their figures. So yes, under that route, it did. On my figures in year 2, but that's still a risk and still the expense to get it into that sort of condition. That's the other thing to make it sort of holiday let viable.
Okay, can we move on to grant funding?
Yes. So I did, obviously, we spoke with the National Lottery Heritage Fund on that side. We could make an application, but I spoke with Heritage Revival Fund as well. What they want before we go anywhere is clarity on what we want to do with the property. They won't lend money on holiday lets. Now I did hear, obviously, that Deputy Mayor said about other places, and I'm aware with Dover as well. But I think that's when you take it as an overall much larger project, and you could have that as part of it. So we need the decision on clarity of the end use. Once we understand what we're going to do with the property, then we can look at the funding opportunities, and the funding will be based on, we can do it with some commercial interest. Can bring in some income as well. This is why I like the idea of doing the museum sort of tourist area, tourist centre, as well as being able to bring in some income. The Heritage Revival Fund, I put here in red, must submit an expression of interest by the 27th of June. Sorry, I made a mistake. The 27th of June is the deadline for their capital grant to actually do the physical work outside and inside. On the 27th of June, that stopped. That will not be issued again in the foreseeable future. So what they would lend money for is the early stages, which is the viability study, and then the next stage, all to do with architectural drawings, effectively.
And would that encompass the exploration work?
No, that's not. It does not.
Well, I think we should go, if we can get money from anywhere, we should apply for that money, and I think we would ask you to prepare that application and submit it within the next 10 days or whatever.
Yes, the expression of interest is initially very straightforward, and then they will ask for any other question. I've got what they're looking for.
Okay.
So,
is everybody happy that we asked Julian to make that or submit that expression of interest? Mr. Mayor? Sorry.
Yeah, I thought the property manager said that we had to have a usage to put the application in.
Yes, sorry, yeah. we do.
So we've got to decide on the usage before we decide on the application, is that correct?
Well, I think
It is.
yeah.
It is correct. We do, as part of the application, you have to say what you're doing. So, and everything you do has to reflect that. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that was my question, but that's then triggered the part two. If we remember where we started from on this was all about affordability for the council. So there was an inherited understanding with the SHT regard to their usage of the property. But the concern from a council perspective was that we couldn't afford to do what fell to the council. So any moving forward, from my personal perspective, we have to understand what costs would fall to the council, because it's fine getting funding to do something, and if it's defined and boxed in, that's okay. But actually, if it's part of a bigger expense that we will also have to meet, we need to know the totality of costs, because we don't have the money. And that's where we started from on the project.
Yes, exactly. The fact is, the funds are not, the funds are not there,
No.
and the funds that are available or available through the Heritage Revival, but it may be given through the National Lottery Heritage Fund. But we must remember, this is not the first time that they've paid money on that particular property. So yes, I mean, as I've provided figures before, what it could cost to actually refurbish, all of the property, and then we looked at it, the exploration works, digging deeper to see exactly what we've got, trying to find, not necessarily find more problems, but to actually get a true idea of how much these items will cost. So it is an expensive, it's a very expensive project, and I did wonder whether the Public Works loan board could be an opportunity.
But we would have to pay for that. So the difference there is when previous councils have done public works loan, the income has come from elsewhere towards that. And the issue we've got is we have roughly £3,000 unallocated in our budget this year.
Yes.
That is the issue.
Yeah. I mean, this is the issue. This is the whole point. Without money, we're not going to get to any of the stages, let alone obviously do a best.
So I just wanted finally to go back on Councillor Wiles' point about we've got £4 million sitting somewhere else. You will be seeing a report from the from Levis, isn't it, in terms of their review, and you just need to read the first paragraph to be very clear about why we failed last time and why we don't want to fail again. It's very much down to our willingness to look outside what the Charity Commission will accept, and one of the things is very much about how we spend the money.
And the other option with this property is that it be transferred to the Tollbridge Fund.
Yes.
Because if it's a charity, then it's much more likely to get grant funding.
Yes. That's correct. I just on that side. So I've looked at that as well. And this property used to receive rent from that property. Tollbridge Fund used to receive rent from that. And there's a letter on file from the commissioner, the Charity Commission, saying that that could, at the time, it was many years ago, but that could actually be used to pay for maintenance of that building. We have that in writing. Legal advice was sought before, and that was remained the same, which is right to the Charity Commission and ask them whether it still remains the same. In which case, if the funds could be used, the property could be could then be let on that hybrid model.
Chair, the proposal with the Heritage Harbour Trust, has that been discussed with them?
Yes.
Because the last I heard when we were meeting with them, we said we would go and look at alternative properties because this property is not suitable as for access.
It wasn't at the time, wasn't suitable for the main reason was the accessibility was a real problem. So we went and had a look. We basically drew a blank on any other any other options. I mean, the possibility long term where the key toilets are is that small area there that we looked at, but they remained interested and we had meetings, and you know, when I realised that the holiday let side was looking, you know, was pretty shaky, we started, you know, we carried on with conversations. My aim was always to support them, and so yeah, and you know, they're still very keen. The initial obviously discussions were, before I started, was that they were going to take the whole building, but you know, we're looking at by splitting it to be able to bring in income. So you know, they are still very keen.
But in terms of the rent, has there been any discussion in the rent or at least?
No, we are. You know, this is one of the reasons why I was, you know, asking, you know, to then go to them again, obviously to fine tune or to discuss that further. I mean, you know, having conversations until we know that is what the route that we're looking to take or potentially take. But before it was a peppercorn rent, and they would take over everything, and it was just the inside that they would, you know, that they would deal with. Well, you know, we've gone past that stage. So.
All right, Councillor Black.
Yeah, the issue of access, though, you've proposed that there be some equivalent of a kind of a stair lift.
Yes, it's a.
Sorry?
You get it, it's actually portable. They actually pulled up in the actual.
A reversive back chair?
Yeah, but a much top sort of,
Motorised, I'm assuming.
That's correct, yes, yeah.
Okay, right, okay.
It's got levitation.
Hoisted from the outside. Yes. Yes, that's there's a demonstration.
Yeah, the other options with SHHT would not be able to progress now because of the devolution process. So they were looked into, but that couldn't take place until the devolution process went through and you found out who was the owner of those bits of land, because the two bits of land that we looked at were by the toilets and by the medieval centre. Obviously that land is now up for grabs, so there's no short-term solution to those two going ahead.
Right. But if an application is made on the basis that we're going to let it out to the Heritage Harbour, is that a commitment? What happens if we didn't reach a final agreement with them?
No funding would be on the basis of releasing the property out to them. No grant funding would be a part of the application. Wouldn't be that we're leasing the property out to them.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No. We would go down the road of doing a museum and a visitor centre ourselves,
Right.
plus accommodation above.
Okay.
What we decide to do after that point would be down to us. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they would take on the lease for the whole property.
No, not necessarily. No, they could take you do it so the communal area would be the stairs, and then they take the ground floor, and then we would have the upstairs. I'm not saying they couldn't use the upstairs, and we would want some items up there as well, you know, that they could use. But it's you know, we would be able to use the upstairs, and we would have no problem in finding people short-term, regular hires on that. In addition, there's a huge demand for. I mean, it's Fishergate. You know, come on, it's a brand in itself to actually use it as an address for companies and charities to use as their registered address for a fee, for a monthly fee. Don't have to do any work for the property to be able to achieve that. So again, there's different sources of giving in the income. But say if the stumbling block is not having the finance or the money there to be able to do the project, and it's going to need, you know, it does need a lot of money. Doing it under this road, though, we don't have to go so. I mean, I was pricing up with a lot of extravagant items, but we could do it at a lot less money. But it's still, you know, it's still money there.
But your view is that the annual running costs to the council or the Torbridge Fund would be met by any income from the various groups?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
I mean,
Yes.
the other alternative, Chair, is that the property be sold.
It can't carry on like it is.
So that's
Something's got to happen.
Something's got to happen.
Yeah.
It's gone on too long.
I agree.
It has. The preference is some kind of holiday community use.
Yeah.
But
Combined, I have to say,
something has to happen.
it certainly does. I mean, lifting the boxes, file boxes is enough. You know, you've ever seen my desk, I can't even see me behind. There's so much. There's so many attempts have been made. I'm not coming up with anything that other people, well, they think they've come up with that last idea, but so many people have attempted it and haven't got anywhere. So a decision's got to be made. I'm not saying you necessarily sell the freehold, assuming you've got the freehold, but you could do it on a long lease. You could put covenants on there. You could stop them doing, you know, it's still if you're getting excited about it, it's still a property that's owned. It's still an asset, but it's actually been sold on a long lease, 99-year lease, handed over to, you know, set it on and put covenants on there. And it's going to come down to those two options. It's going to be one of those two.
Understand? In terms of the exploration works, can you just talk us through those, please, and the
Yes.
impact on the council?
Financially, obviously professional fees, you know, you need someone to be there to, obviously could prepare all the initial sort of documentation, but you need someone who's going to, you know, attend the meetings and prepare the reports, you know, exactly what we found there. So yes, you've got that expense. We will need it, in the ideal world, we'd need another couple of drawings. It would be useful to have the internal elevations because the walls have been taken down. But yes, I mean, it's work that, say, the community could get involved with. I would like to put the toilet back to the use that it should be, get rid of that shower so that no one else is going to try to, you know, to use that. But again, it's, you know, it's not cheap. I put my hands up, I'm only a bit top heavy on the 6,000, but it's still a fair bit of work there. Removing all of the walls, taking them all out. I'm talking about obviously the panelling, but it's still a job. All the plaster, getting those tiles off, and you know, the ceiling. Now, this is probably going a bit over the top than we would need, and Historic England would accept if we could just reveal some areas. They're particularly interested in what's under the stairs because they think there could have been another door in there at some stage coming in. So they're very interested in them. So we don't have to go the whole hog. But to be quite honest with you, if I was doing a refurbishment there, I'd take that paneling off anyway. That'd be the first job I'd do. Expose the brickwork underneath. We want to see what it's like underneath. You know, so it doesn't have to. It wouldn't necessarily reach this amount. It can be done less, but I think correct me if I'm wrong, Town Clerk, I think I got about £2,000 on that budget, haven't I, for that property?
I think it's somewhere between 2 and 3, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
But I think for me, without understanding the actual condition of the building,
yes,
to be able to then price up properly the kind of the repair work that's needed,
that's right,
to make the building sufficient to last 99 years
exactly,
or whatever.
Yes,
You'll be paying somebody to take it off our hands for 99 years. You know, it's almost like that in my mind, because certain parts of the brickwork are crumbling. Some of the previous repairs have not been particularly done well.
yes,
And for me, we really need to understand what our liability is.
yes.
So,
and when I had the meeting with the heritage consultant, he said exactly the same. How do you know how much that window is going to be until you can reveal what the art is? So that makes perfect sense.
and I'd re-echo what Councillor Pennington said about using this as a community project. I think that's kind of a great idea to involve
Yes,
volunteers, and so I think my preference would be to go that route. Councillor Carter.
Just an important aspect that doesn't seem to have been raised. Do we have any asbestos reports on that building?
no, we don't. I don't believe there's asbestos. I've seen the older photographs. I do not believe that we would do an asbestos report. It would be undertaken, but we will need to remove on the second floor that first section of panelling that was put in by whoever he was there, because it's to get to the second layer.
Exactly.
So he put some in, but we don't know what's behind that.
Yeah.
So the first lot you see is plasterboard. Behind that, it could be asbestos, and we would have that checked.
I just wanted to point out, Mr. Chairman, that before we allow any community intervention on this property, we do need to make sure that there isn't any asbestos that could be disturbed.
Well, there's the whole health and safety aspects and all of the risk assessments, and everything that would need to be done. And asbestos and hazardous materials have come out, I'm sure, as part of the risk assessments for doing any work.
Correct.
And any volunteers that are going in would have to be properly briefed,
Exactly.
and they would have to be, have proper protective equipment. and
Exactly
stuff.
that. Yeah, it goes more than just a toolbox
Yeah.
chat. So yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Green, can I just one question? I do apologise, I've come late. I've had 2 meetings at once and plus finishing work late, so I do apologise for coming late. Just wanted to one question to also you talk about Fishergate. Last time I went into the Fishergate was about 4 years ago when I won the by-election of my first term here, and there were a few councillors that went in to have a look around Fishergate, and it was in a dilapidated state then.
Yes.
I just wanted to know if the STC or the Tories are going to look into for a chart surveyor to go in there or an architect to have a look at it and see what work is actually needed.
This is what we do with the part of the exploration,
Right.
is to reveal where we're at.
And maybe not, that question
Yes.
may have been answered earlier.
Oh
so
no,
I
no,
do
no, no,
apologise.
no, it makes perfect sense until you actually reveal what's behind. You can't get a true picture.
Yeah.
It's not very difficult for anyone to actually list what is likely to be done, but until you actually get, and they're specialists as well. This is just talking about the internal. When you look at the external, it's another world, and that's why you need obviously consultants who know what they're doing on board. What the consultant who I met there said, that a lot of the work that had been done was actually done to a good standard. Some of the pointing that was done, but there's a lot that needs to be done. Including aspects of the of the roof as well that have been picked up. But again, you have to then draw the line. How far do you go? Do you recreate a whole brand new Fishergate, and you won't get any change from probably 300,000? I would have thought, and it wouldn't even touch the sides of that sort of figure. So,
Okay, so are we happy to draw this report to a conclusion and accept the recommendations to receive the report and a vote on some of the recommendations, or vote on some of the aspects that we've discussed? So I think we're all happy to receive the report. Are we happy that we agree an end use of, as the deputy manager has suggested, a museum and premises for the Harbour Trust?
I'll be happy to propose that.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other?
Well, there needs to be obviously further discussions with them and agreements on principles and so
if
on.
you took their name out of the equation, just and say that we're looking for a museum and sort of visitor centre with the use upstairs, without mentioning who could be running it, that would be great. Then I will be having, if you agree, that I can then have obviously more discussions with them, and I can bring that back. But if we can agree to take this forward to the next stage, please, of a museum, visitor centre with accommodation above.
But Chair, I think because this has gone on so long, we as a committee or a council need to set deadlines and say, try and achieve grant funding applications by this date, confirmation of the deal by this date, because it's gone on.
I think it's very difficult to, when the work isn't in our control, receiving grant funding is not something that we can control. We can make a submission,
make the
application or the expression of interest, over the next 10 days, and then agree that we're going to have a continual process of seeking grant funding, because even for doing the work with the volunteers as a community project, we're still looking at £7,000, and at this moment this council hasn't got £7,000 spare to spend.
We could ask the property manager to draft a roadmap that could be a dynamic document which would take into account any movements of time as we go along, which would detail what Councillor Wiles is asking for.
Are you happy to do that? Because I'm not actually too clear what that roadmap would look like. You know, it's a decision tree type of thing. But
So the purpose of today is to take a recommendation to full council.
Yes.
I just get, a vote has been called and already proposed, so we need to go to the vote. But I was just going to say we have a interested party, which is the SHHT. I need to personally would want to be assured that whatever we're doing here today is in their understanding, that it isn't undermining their perceived agreement that they have in place. So I just don't want us to have another bushfire through our actions tonight. So if we know that they are fully aware of what we're doing and they're fully in agreement, then that's okay.
Yeah, but surely they are.
Be sure they are, or they.
I can say they are fully aware. Fully aware.
Okay.
Can I just make some clarification? So obviously Mr Mayor's just said about that, what he's just said, but I also agree with what Councillor Wiles has just said. Maybe, possibly, we could agree currently now, because obviously the proposal second's been made, and also we could, on Monday's meeting, is that we start looking at like time frames and stuff and funding and bits and pieces and having this further discussion on Monday, if that makes any sense. Basically agree in principle, because obviously if we agree this now, it's going to go to STC, so then the full council gets it.
It won't go to STC next Monday. Will it?
Yeah.
There is a report that's already gone out.
Yeah.
Let's just be careful we don't go to STC on Monday with a very long agenda and have the same play out of this discussion.
Well, this is why I want to support that.
That's why, yes, exactly, with recommendation.
If we're talking to SHHT, could we not say we try and agree heads of terms with them by a certain date to bring back to the full council or to this committee?
So on my report that's for Monday, I'm asking for permission to talk with them in more detail.
Yeah.
And then bring that, and then, so that's what I'm asking for in the next one. One of the points was to then bring that back once I've got to that stage for then that decision to be made. But at this point I'm saying museum, tourist centre on the first floor and other accommodation above.
We shouldn't be having a roadmap with heads of terms because two things, we haven't got the money, so any cost we may not be able to afford, number one.
Yes.
Secondly, this is enabling a grant application, which is what you're looking for. That's what we're supporting.
Yes.
We're not supporting a heads of term to go into an agreement with a third party that we may not actually be able to
Exactly.
pay.
That's exactly right.
Who haven't got the money to actually pay a viable rent.
Yes.
I'm just worried we'll be having the same discussion a year from now unless we push things along.
Well, it's all about money at the end of the day.
But I think you need to agree.
But unless we've got a property that's in a fit state to rent out, which we haven't, and let's not kid ourselves, we're a million miles away from that. And a million miles might as well be £1 a mile, because we could spend £1 million on that bill to get it into a proper.
As I said, if it's such a liability, then should we sell it?
That's another discussion. First up, we need to understand the condition of the building and the costs going forward, and what are the options to actually get funding for it, whether it's external funding, whether it's funding from one of the other charities, or whatever.
Yes.
We've got to understand that.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're just dancing around.
Yes.
So the clarity for Monday, and this is what Monday's group needs to know, this is an agreement that we're recommending that enables the property manager to put in an application for a grant based on the museum, visitor centre and accommodation. And that's the box.
That's it.
To progress the design.
And also have discussions.
Yes.
To continue the discussions.
Discussions, yes.
That's fine.
That's the proposals on the table.
Second that.
All right.
Eventually.
Okay, so that's the first aspect. The second aspect.
Thank you.
The second aspect then, in terms of setting up a community project to undertake the enabling works or the exploratory works. Is anybody willing to propose that, bearing in mind that we do not have the finance available at this time, so perhaps it would be better to defer that?
I would propose deferring it until we know the money's going to be there, because there's no point creating a community group to do something to the Fishergate when there's no money to do anything for it. So that would be my opinion.
So relevant fact that the property manager said as part of the application we had to show that we were actually engaging with the community. So if we don't go ahead with this proposal, it won't look like it'll look like we're just waiting for the money to engage with the community. So I would propose that we do go ahead with this option, which will give a clear view to the trust fund that we are prepared to engage with the community. Nobody said what date or what time or how, but we should be saying that we're going to engage with the community.
But is engaging with the community about its future use as opposed to doing the interim work? So
That was more to do with the work, bringing them on board to be able to do work. But by having community involvement, it goes so far to actually getting the grant, because you've got support and you've got people who will be backing it. So it makes perfect sense.
So we could take steps, just to be clear, could we take steps to start thinking about it?
That's right.
And maybe to canvass interest.
Magazine, Town Park, would that be possible?
In the magazine asking for responses, that would fulfil that requirement.
Excellent.
I think just keep simply say that in rapid order we have to develop proposals for how we're going to engage the community. Because if we just put out scattergun, you're going to get so many bits and pieces. Then you start getting the infighting about it, because Group A wanted it in Group B and everything else like that. I think you need to come back with a proposal as to how it would work. And I haven't any ideas about that at all. And if that's necessary, as Councillor Carter has said, that we have to demonstrate we are progressing towards community involvement, then I think whether it's yourself or whether it's someone else has to start putting a proposal together. Otherwise, if you just put it out, I think we will just run into the sand.
But isn't the proposal just for the exploratory works and so
Oh, yes.
forth, that the community involvement? It's not
Community involvement.
It's not that one wants to do one thing with it and other wants to do. It's a scope of works that's predetermined
Because
by
it
the property
follows-
manager.
Because it follows the agreement that we will have a museum on the first floor and it comes back, and the space above the rent. So it can't be anything else. So once we agree that, then we can look at the involvement of people.
Propose the agreement of engaging with community.
Without moving to expend any monies on the actual work.
At this stage.
At this stage. Okay, everybody's happy with that?
I'm happy to get my hands dirty.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, who's seconding that proposal? Are you?
Okay. Is there any further discussion we need to have on Fishergate? Okay, let's close the meeting. The date and time of the next meeting is going to be, regular meeting is the 16th of July, although there may be an extraordinary meeting next week. All right, Town Clerk? So close the meeting at 8:05.